This week, Juliet Okafor from Revolution Cyber has a story to tell about why sometimes good CISOs build bad security programs. Then Joseph Salazar from Ativo Networks joins us to talk about the importance of identity detection and response. Finally, in the security news, cyber insurance firm Coalition lands a $205 million Series E with a $3.5 billion valuation. Crazy numbers again this week. Risk management platform PanaRaise nabs $42 million. JScrambler raises a $15 million Series A to rewrite the rules of website security. A little bit of a AppSec pun in there for folks that get that. Senson nabs $20 million for faster, more accurate cybersecurity detection and response. LG, yes, that LG, is acquiring automotive cybersecurity startups. Yeah, this one's called Cybellum. We talk about the emergence of the vendor live security status page, 386 startup postmortems, and don't forget to stick around for the squirrel story at the end. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. SOC analysts are often overworked and underappreciated. In fact, 78% say that working in the SOC is very painful. Yikes. On October 20th, Devo is establishing SOC Analyst Appreciation Day to pay some long overdue kudos to you and encourage organizations to improve SOC analyst job satisfaction and mental well-being. Join Devo as they celebrate SOC analysts around the world and provide opportunities for personal and professional development, all while you unwind with programming specifically designed to help you de-stress. You can also win a Nintendo Switch if you participate in Devo's Twitter hashtag contest. All you have to do is follow @Devo_Inc. on Twitter and tweet using hashtag SOC Analyst Day. Visit securityweekly.com/Devo to sign up and learn more. The hybrid workforce is here to stay, and it requires real-time visibility, control, and rapid response of every endpoint, whether it's in the office or home. Tanium offers an endpoint management and security platform built for the most demanding IT environments. Many of the world's largest and most sophisticated organizations, including nearly half of the Fortune 100, rely on Tanium to deliver unmatched endpoint visibility and control. Whether you're preparing for zero trust or protecting your network from supply chain risk, Tanium empowers technology leaders to achieve greater agility, efficiency, and confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Tanium.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. This is episode 244, recorded on Wednesday, September 29th, 2021. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today is Mr. Tyler Shields. Hello, Tyler.
What's up, Adrian? Coming from a slightly different location today and got some uglier headphones on, but how are you today?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, it's always fun seeing co-hosts mixing things up. We're just talking about people moving to new houses, and I'm constantly seeing new recording backgrounds and locations. It's fun.
Yeah, I got to do something a little prettier than this. It's just my ugly home office. I need like a fancy background down there. I'll get there eventually.
But no matter where you are, there are guitars in the background somewhere.
Yeah, it's mandatory, man.
How many do you own?
6 to 8, somewhere, including a little guy there, a little electric ukulele.
Not sure how many guitars he owns, folks. We get a range. We get an estimate.
Yeah, somewhere in that range for sure.
We also have guest co-host standing in for Paul, Mr. Lee Neely. Hello, Lee.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about our guest today, and I'm from my usual location down in Idaho, and unfortunately I don't have any sexy stuff in the background. I just don't want to mess up the wainscoting.
I recognize the I was going to call it chair molding, but yeah. It's familiar to me.
But in any event, this is going to be fun.
Absolutely. So, quick announcement, don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, our Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. So our first interview for today, how good CISOs build bad security programs. Really excited for this topic and really excited for our guest today. Juliet Okafor the CEO and founder of Revolution Cyber. Juliet is a doctor of law who combines her knowledge of the legal system, with her knowledge of cyber to help her Fortune 500 clients succeed. Juliet is a strategist who can turn a problem into a plan, especially when it involves people and process, which is right along the lines of what we'll discuss today. Welcome, Jules.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, why would you shift away from a promising career in law to the hot mess we've got going on right now in cybersecurity? There's got to be a story there. Right?
There's quite the story. I don't even know if we have enough time. My parents are quite disappointed in my decision. I thought I'd be an attorney, but I found the practice of law quite boring. I was good at writing briefs, but the idea that I wouldn't have the Matlock finishes made it so I didn't want to practice for the rest of my life. Got into cybersecurity, and now I practice law every single day.
Disappointed in you, like you're a professional gamer, or like, I mean, what's wrong with cyber?
My background is I'm Nigerian. My parents, they gave me 4 career choices. I could either be an engineer, and that is a computer engineer, traditional, not software. I could be a professor, a doctor, or a lawyer who practices in courtrooms. I am neither of those things. And therefore, they don't know how to quantify my success. And therefore, they're not sure if they can be proud of me. So that's really what this is about. It's about whether my parents are proud of me. And they are not, and I'm okay with that.
Welcome to the therapy show. Welcome to the therapy show.
lots of therapy. It costs me a lot per week, but it's okay. I'm getting through it.
Well, it's a good thing your parents didn't set a low bar or something on you. I mean, you know.
Well, my father has a PhD. Actually, he has 2. So he's the one who sets the bar.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, part of the point here is that legal background comes in handy, right?
Yes. The future of cybersecurity is going to require backgrounds that are non-security, non-technical. And so the combination of my skill sets are, I'm an attorney with 2 marketing degrees, and I've had at least, over 15 years in sales. So I am very knowledgeable about what it feels like to be rejected, and CISOs are rejected all the time inside organizations. So I can help them through that. But I think also fundamentally, I'm very adept at learning how to influence and helping people to do the things that they don't want to do, even when they know they should and may not be able to afford it. So the sales background, I think, has been the most helpful in my career in helping CISOs to develop the kinds of skills they need in building out security programs.
And you're in that magical position. I don't know why it is this way. Maybe you can enlighten me, but because you don't work for the company, you can say the same exact things that they've been saying till they're blue in the face. And because it comes from an outside consultant, they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
And of course, the people there are like, we've been saying that for 2 years, right?
It literally is because someone wrote a check. And so they're like, someone's paying her. It's got to be that she's smart, or we agree with something she's saying. I also have the ability to not accept additional work and to say no. If you're an employee, you can leave. It tends to be a little bit more difficult, a lot more complexity. So yeah, as a third party, I'm viewed as objective, and I can speak more bluntly than I think you can from the inside.
Absolutely. So often, I think when people think about cybersecurity problems, they tend to think more, and maybe I'm projecting here, but they tend to think more about technical problems and solutions. But when I analyze breaches, and of course, my time spent on the enterprise side, the pattern there is not a lack of security products and technical controls in my experience. It's generally that things have broken down at the people and process level. Why is it we so often see that? We see broken or ineffective processes in InfoSec.
There are several reasons. I like to identify at least 4. Why we continue to see the same problems over and over again. And they're really legitimately, I think Helen Patton asked the question on LinkedIn just the other day, whether there's been a solution to any of the problems that have occurred in security in the last 15 to 20 years, and there has not been. Primarily because, one, security leaders are change agents. They are not technical leaders. They are not technologists. They are designed to go into organizations and make swift, rapid change. And many of them don't see themselves as that. Secondly, many go in trying to immediately establish control and see themselves as needing to create what is a fiefdom. So I'm going to go into the organization, create all of these, teams, policies, rules, and then I'm going to exert them on everybody. And because everyone should believe in what it is I'm doing, because I was brought in by the board to get this done, then they must do it. They must do. And they tend to be either walked out of the buildings, unceremoniously fired, or, really alienated and told, not to speak in meetings that are of consequence. The third reason I find is there's a measurement of activity over outcomes. It is not important that you have so many events and incidents and you've got so many mitigations and so many frameworks and that many regulations. It is important whether you've helped the organization to meet its revenue requirements, you've met your board KPIs, you've helped the organization to meet its responsibilities to clients, you've protected the organization from so many threats. Those are outcomes rather than activities. And I think the conversation has to shift in ways that are conducive to discussion that allows for quality over quantity. I think that's really where a lot of it gets lost. And finally, there is too much congratulation of CISOs awarding themselves, self-aggrandizing, all kinds of things that they're defining success for themselves. One of the clearest ways I can tell whether CISO is successful is by asking their peers. Almost always there's disagreement about the level of success that was achieved, mostly because success is not measured by how you define yourself. It is about your ability to mobilize success for others. And if you are not able to make your peers successful, it's very likely you weren't successful. So those four things across the board end up making these when I look at security programs, they are failing. But because there are echo chambers of people saying how great they are, and then the same bad CISOs or great CISOs with bad programs move from one company to another, we continue to see the same repeat habits over and over again.
It sounds like family counseling.
Yes, it does. There actually is a great deal of that.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I've trained salespeople, therapy, it kind of that way of thinking about it, like letting CISOs talk about their problems, doing a lot of listening, basically, instead of assuming what their problems are and how to fix them. I think a lot of it, in selling stuff to CISOs, but yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So yeah, the metaphor to fiefdoms, it sounds like immediately they're putting up these walls between themselves and the rest of the business.
Yes. And what we find when I talk about this idea of a moat is that the technology becomes the reason why they can't connect. Although technology is viewed often as an enabler and built as a bridge, cybersecurity leaders, I find, often use technology as a reason why they don't have to communicate. And so they aren't doing, a number of CISOs are not going out of the office to do meetings, outside. They're not having, in-person meetings, taking walks. They're not, facilitating even via Zoom. A lot of it is, I'm going to let, the chat do the talking. I'm going to allow my email communication to do the work for me. And it is having an impact on their ability to deliver a result at the most important time that it's needed. Oftentimes, I talk about this idea of early often. The communication style is, I'm going to need political capital. I'm going to need my relationships at the times when I'm either got my back against the wall, there's a major deadline, or this project can't fail. That's typically the time I feel like security leaders are reaching out, and it's the worst time to do so.
So what I thought I'm hearing you saying is that it's really not just sending out email blasts or IM blasts. It's yes. Building the relationship, the trust with the business, learning what's important on both sides of the table. That's actually like hard and scary for some folks, but it sounds like it's undervalued in terms of the CISO's priority list. Am I reading you right?
Yes, it is actually the most undervalued. What happens the most is huge budgets, millions of dollars are spent on technology. And then at the tail end, when all the money's spent, they'll say, I've set aside $20,000 for a communications campaign. But if the communications campaign fails, the technology won't succeed. So it's almost like there needs to be a rethinking about what it is technology is designed to do and how communication, and I talk about change management, change and driving change enables that technology to succeed. In fact, if you're working the people area and you're leveraging process, you're re-engineering it, you're working with different groups to restructure, the technology will be easier. But I think we're working backwards, and that's why we continue to get the same poor results.
I have heard of models where we put cyber professionals as not really professionals, but they're sitting in the business unit at a senior level, and their job is to interface with the CISO types to make sure that the message is heard in both directions. Is that a helpful kind of a model, or is this something that belongs more in the CISO's realm?
It is one step better. What I'll say is, I think, Adrian, you and I talk about this. So there is this desire to embed security in the business so that security has an opportunity to hear business as it's happening, to be able to respond in real time. And it actually is able to engage in that shift left model. So it is being considered earlier in the decision-making process. The challenge with the way it's being done, it's actually being done in a very hierarchical, bureaucratic way in which this person, typically a BISO, is directly reporting to the line of business leader, then directly reporting to the CISO. Those two people, the line of business leader, the CISO, they don't talk. This person now has to report to two different people. They've got to communicate now twice. They've got to speak to the people inside the team. We've just complicated their reporting structure, sometimes complicating their communication. So what we've done is place more responsibility on them, but not provided them the channels by which they need in order to make that easier. So we've solved one problem, but then created some new problems. So what we have to do actually is start to embed security within the way in which we communicate across the organization anyway. From the very beginning, when someone comes into the organization, we need to begin to train them on how their role and what the security responsibilities are within that role, and have ongoing training that's targeted towards the role. So each person has a fundamental role in security, and it's a shared model across the organization. That BISO has less responsibility to both teach, train, communicate. And I think that would be overall the best way to handle that.
So Jules, it sounds like, so who hires you here? Because it almost sounds like somebody outside the security organization could hire you, be like, we're about to fire the CISO, but we just want to stage an intervention, see if you can salvage something here, bring you in. But on the flip side, I could see a CISO hiring you to have you help them take care of everybody else because they're not the problem. And then you come in and you have to break that news to them. Does that happen?
So I've been in a situation where I was brought in by the head of cybersecurity, and I was told they weren't able to get things done because they were meeting all these obstacles. So I went in, we do what we call a cultural assessment across 5 different areas. And we met with several stakeholders, head of marketing, head of HR, head of compliance, and also met with their legal team. And each one of them had the same or similar feedback. And what it was a lack of clear communication on what the objectives were of security and understanding the overlap between security and their role and how to navigate those things. What would happen when there was conflict was that there would be a push back of the other person. So that person would be put off and then no one would speak again. So the security leader thought they don't want to work with me, but that person said, well, they were aggressive towards me. And it turned out that there was responsibility on the security leader's part. It is very difficult to explain to someone who's hired you that they are part of the problem. In that moment, I have to remind them what their goal is and how quickly they need to show results to the organization so that they'll think less about how painful it is to have to go through that, to have to acknowledge it, and start thinking about the least tense relationship, the one that has the most likelihood to impact them and that would cause them the least frustration. And then we start to go slowly by slowly. We start to go slowly to each person, and each conversation builds more momentum and we get more support in order to get that security leader the kind of support they need. It takes a long time. I think the shortest time I've had to do some of this stuff is 6 months. But I am traditionally hired by a CISO who has the foresight to understand that they cannot go alone, especially if you're a change agent. You have to enable the people around you.
So at least they've taken a step in the right direction, right? In understanding that they need help and reaching out for that.
Yes. So it's a small window, but there's a growing number of CIOs, chief development officers, chief product officers who are bringing me in because they have a mandate by the organization for digital transformation. Almost always security must be embedded. It must be enabled, and it has to happen quickly. So when there's a rapid shift required, we're brought in to control communications, to facilitate conversations, and to determine what the outcomes are with clear KPIs.
So kind of breaking down some of the factors that you see here.
Sure.
Obviously the CISO personality themselves, company culture can be a challenge, I know, in a lot of organizations for the security team. And then it sounds like poor relationships, poor communication between them. Are there more factors, and are there some factors that you see more often than others? Obviously, there's more factors, but
there are really strong security programs in toxic work cultures. It rarely exists. Whenever I find a company that is struggling externally with reports of major lawsuits, lots of employee complaints, lots of things happening, we may not understand what's going on under the hood, but they have a hard time with building strong security programs, mostly because if you think of security as challenging most of what an organization requires, which is stability, security is always asking the organization to change. In organizations like that, they're trying to get a grasp on a handle on all the things that are changing and developing. They are the least receptive to security at that time. Almost always you see them aligned if there was recently a breach or if the security of the organization is fundamentally tied with the business model. So for instance, the Googles and the Apples of the world. But if they are not so intrinsically tied, it tends to be that the worse the work culture, the less likely the CISO will be successful in building a strong security program. The other thing, when I find organizations that outsource almost everything as a part of their culture, security tends to be a low-level priority. Not because because I have been in board meetings where the board truly believes in security. However, there requires an investment and a commitment in cybersecurity to get it right. And ultimately, when the organization believes in outsourcing, there's a cultural aspect of it where they believe in distributing responsibility to others. So I often don't see very heavily outsourced models where they have a strong security program, even if the security program has a large security employee team. And those are things I don't see correlations with, no matter the size of the company.
So are you saying that when they're outsourced, they're outsourcing their commitment as well, that it suddenly becomes put it in the box, forget about it, it's not important anymore, or something like that?
Yes. There's a heavy focus on technology, a heavy focus on service delivery through SOCs, and there's also a heavy less focus on quality of employee hiring and the way employees are treated. So they have high turnover with employees as well.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That sounds like not a great place to work.
I would say so. Which means that it will eventually become outsourced as well. Sorry, go ahead.
When communications and relationships are so important, it very different from the fiefdom kind of situation that you described earlier when CISOs come in with that mentality. But it's still a wall. When you're outsourcing stuff like that, you're still throwing things over a wall. There's still that mentality of, oh, security is something somebody else does.
That's
right?
it. That's it. Until
not
the bad thing happens, that's it. And you haggle over a contract, a legal piece of paper. That's not a commitment on anybody's part. I always say a contract is made in a handshake. It is made in a verbal agreement. The document is what's written down, but you've really already determined whether you're going to follow the letter of the contract before that. So whenever I see an organization, and if security goes through legal or finance and even IT, there tends to be less commitment to it than if it goes through operations, the CEO, the CAO sometimes, and chief risk officer. So there are patterns that continue to reveal themselves about programs. What you'll hear me say over and over again has nothing to do with the leader themselves. It almost always has to do with external factors that have that they're not in control of. One of the fallacies that we talk in security is we talk about security as though the CISO has control over it. And they really have the least control over all the other things that impact a security program. And that's why good CISOs can build bad programs, because they have the least responsibility and the least influence on whether they're good or bad.
They're a passenger.
They're just a passenger down for the ride. Yeah.
Tyler, I want to make sure you get a chance to ask questions here.
No, I mean, the human aspect of it's always a difficult problem. And relationships, I would argue, are probably the most important piece of it. I think a lot of it has to do with a CISO's approach, their overall approach and view into how they're going to build the group. I agree completely with what Jules has said to date. So, yeah, spot on.
What do you think about, though, this? Why are we seeing the billions and the millions, though, in technology investment? I just heard about the billion number. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I actually saw recently a trillions in M&A trillions number this year or something like that. And I don't know if it was just cyber M&A or global M&A. I don't remember. But either way, it's, a lot of money goes into tools. A lot of money goes into building companies, building products, building vendors, right? And that's because it generates revenue and it generates money for the tool makers. It may or may not make security any better. And I've been around the security world for long enough to know that, it does make things better, but there is no tool that's an overall panacea that solves all problems. And that's why you get the whole defense in depth / expense in depth model.
Yes.
Right? It just costs a ton to fix the problems at any level of depth. And I think it's because risk is non-linear. Risk is not binary, right? You can't just go do X, fix problem, right? It's not that simple. And so you get a breadth of tools, you get a breadth of processes, you get a breadth of people that are required to solve the problem. And that's why, major banks have 3,000 to 5,000 employees dedicated to cybersecurity, right? It's just not something you can flip a switch on.
No.
And Jules, I think you nailed it earlier when you talked about the lack of focus on outcomes. The falling into this trap where you feel like you're doing stuff because you're busy. I think that's where a lot of these products come in, is they make people feel like, they put them on the treadmill, right? Like they're not going anywhere, but they're getting exercise.
And quite literally, one of the other audio books I was listening to by John Carter, what he was saying is part of the problem with technology is that the producers, the coders, everyone who builds technology is rewarded for an incremental change. As long as there is an incremental improvement on what existed before, even if you think about the agile model, as long as it's better than it was by a little bit than before, you're rewarded with millions, trillions, billions of dollars. But actually, our industry requires wholesale, rapid change. That can only be done in people and process, but that's not rewarded in the same way. Once we start to reward people for changing people, for shifting mindsets and processes in the same way we reward for technology, we will see the shift. It's why we're not seeing the shifts that we need to see in the industry.
What book was that?
It's called Changes by John Carter.
Well, it's a super interesting point. When I think back over the course of my career, and I think of markets or technologies or products or vendors that have had significant security success, they're one of two things. They tend to be human process changes, a la Microsoft in the early 2000s when they declared, hey, we're going to do security right for our business. Yep. And they started putting in tons of massive amounts of procedural and people changes to fix the problem at a broad level in their products. And things got better. So that's kind of the one storyline. The other storyline is getting ahead of it from an engineering standpoint. If we think of, and I know, again, this isn't a technology that's perfect, but the technology story could be like, hey, Apple wrote their phones in a secure manner from the get-go. And there's been, and even mobile in general is more secure than desktop. Why is that? Is that because of putting people and processes in place? This is my guess, putting people and processes in place to build that technology from the ground up as a securely designed platform? Probably so, right? So again, it gets back to having the right people in the right place at the right time to do security, both in a product manner and in a generic or generalized enterprise manner. It requires people. It requires skills. It requires human thinking. There is no tool that's going to fix everything.
I completely agree. And I think you have to have the ability to separate the maintenance of your current products from what would be the future build of a new product designed to completely approach that people process thing. Apple, I think that I was just listening to the audiobook, and they were saying the way in which change is happening with technology. I think the iPhone was able to kind of catapult within 12 years. I think the iPhone was within 3 years. Before that, it took, I think IBM, it took like 60 years. So they're basically saying like the speed of change is rapidly happening, but we're still not at a point that it's happening rapidly enough to keep up with the shift in the way humans are behaving. So until we can get ahead of it, we won't be able to see the change we need, especially on the security side. I think we think that we can't control mindsets, but marketing has figured out how to change mindsets. Think about consumers and how we buy. That's shifted substantially since at least even I was a kid. So I would say that we've got to bring some of that to the forefront, which is what I'm trying to do. How do we take marketing, neuroscience, brain research, bring it into security so we can teach people what they need to know, and they can also be part of the solution in solving our cybersecurity challenge. And not discussing awareness, because that's another problem that we could talk about.
But you're talking about you're building an allegiance and partnership there with. You're not scaring them that their world's going to end or they're not going to be able to get their objectives met, which is really important. And we can leave the A word on the floor.
In some ways, and I'll say this with my quiet voice, in some ways, I talk about this idea of cyber diplomacy and this idea of propaganda. If you really think about it, if you think about what marketing is designed to do, it really is about getting into subconscious thoughts and leveraging that for the purpose of action. We've got to start to do that better inside organizations for the purpose of the greater good, but in ways that respect privacy, respect people's ability to say no. That's the hard part. Is on the outside, we've agreed in ways that we allow, the marketplace to convince us to do things we don't even know we're doing. But inside organizations, there's a limit, there's a cutoff. The question is, how do we convince people that they want to do the thing that they don't know that they want to do, but we really need them to do now? And that's a whole shift in mindset from the top down. We have to have approval from the organization's board all the way through C-suite. And then we've got to keep building it into the way in which we're communicating inside the organization. I think security and the organizations I work with, they understand the fundamental need to do that, and they're doing that. That's what I've seen is a trend. And I think where product security is involved, DevOps, that shift is happening rapidly, most rapidly.
Yeah, and I think it's a healthy change too, getting away from this idea that people are going to do security because it's security. Of course you have to do it because we said it's important. You're going to do it, and more this mindset that, no, you need to learn to compromise. You need to sell it. You got to, nothing very few things in security are just 100% you got to do it.
Yes.
There's not a whole lot of airbags and seatbelts in security. It's always,
and it's got to be beautiful. It's got to be. Can you imagine the kind of beautiful, well-designed ads we see when we're at home, and then the kinds of horrible security awareness videos we see in the office? Like, why would I want to do what you're asking me to do? It's like, you either think I'm an idiot or a kid, right? It's almost insulting. When I ask users, what they think about security awareness videos, they immediately grimace or they make really loud sounds. They're like, ugh, they hate it. But we keep feeding it to them because we hope something will convince them, not even convinced, that they'll just do it and leave us alone. We've got to get away from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one more question for you, and we'll wrap up here. I wish we had a full hour, but I know. But we gotta get moving here. Kind of curious if there is anything you can point out. Where do you find your light bulb moments most often with clients? Is there a particular topic or a way that you lay things out that makes things click with them? If they've been really looking at things the wrong way, do you have kind of go-tos that help people get to that point to where they can start, where maybe they don't need your advice on a day-to-day, they can check in maybe weekly and they're heading in the right direction? I thought I just asked a really thoughtful question.
You did. You stumped her, man. You stumped her. You scared her away.
That was a really good question.
And what's funny is I was considering rapping there.
Well, now's a good opportunity to rap, Adrian.
All right. So I had several. That was like I was choosing between like one of five. So we'll just have to have Jules back on.
Absolutely.
That's all there is.
We'll bring her back on soon.
That was an almost perfect place to wrap. Yeah, I should have just wrapped there. So, Jules, sorry, that happened. Thank you for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. You can learn more about Jules's company, Revolution Cyber, at revolutioncyber.com. Also, she will be speaking at InfoSec World. Listeners can go to securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to save 20% on their digital pass and check out her talk. So stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk identity detection and response with Joseph Salazar from Ativo Networks.